Just to let you know, the film included in this episode includes a scene of attempted sexual assault. Welcome to Filmability. My name is Joel Fisher and I'm the author of Filmability, a Restricted Screen in Cinema, which you can find on Amazon and Kindle paperback. Welcome if this is your first time listening, and welcome back if you listened before. Remember you can find me wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment and all that good stuff. This week's episode is Blind Justice, a made-for-TV movie from 1994 about a mysterious blind gunslinger who finds himself in the middle of a battle between Civil War soldiers and a gang of bandits. Blind Justice was directed by Richard Spence, who previously directed various episodes of British television series such as Brookside, Bergerac and Poirot, and went on to direct films such as Different for Girls and Promoted for Glory, with Ken Stott and Leslie Manville. Blind Justice is the first screenplay for Daniel Knauf, a producer who went on to write screenplays for Supernatural and Spartacus, but is perhaps best known for his series Carnival from 2003 to 2005, with Michael J. Anderson, Adrian Balbo and Clancy Brown. As usual, I suggest you watch Blind Justice before continuing with the podcast, because I will be spoiling everything, and you can find it on HBO Max in the UK, and presumably everywhere else, because that is who it was made for. So without further ado, let's get on with the film. Okay, so the film starts out with a man walking across wasteland with cowboys surrounding him and shooting in the air. One man gets off his horse and asks where this man's going, and he reveals that he's carrying a baby. Then, without looking, the man shoots the men off their horses and pulls his glasses down to reveal little opaque contact lenses, basically meaning he's blind. He also lights up a cigar and points a gun at the man. This man is called Kanan, and he's played by Aman Dasante. Riding into town, many people are strung up and hanged. All of them are dead. A man is then seen surrounded by cowboys, roped like a horse, and he's interrogated. He tells the leader of the gang about Kanan, who shot the cowboys on the horses. Al-Quran, who's the leader of the gang, says he doesn't know, and he talks about what they're going to do next. Al-Quran is played by Robert Davey. The man begs for water, and one of the men gets off his horse and he pisses on him. Al-Quran then suggests that they need something more, and they bring out a snake, but shoots the man instead, as he pleads for his life. In the next scene, Kanan is coming into town, holding a baby and pulling along 3 horses with the dead cowboys on them. A priest chews away a shaman as he greets Kanan. A priest chews away a Native American man who's outside of the church as he greets Kanan. This is Father Malone, and he's played by Ian McElhenney. Father Malone is threatened and gets hold of the gun as he talks to Kanan, but Kanan tells him to put it away. Also, I should say that the Native American man is just referred to as the shaman, and he's played by Jimmy Herman. In another building, some men are talking and wondering how Kanan got into town. They're Civil War soldiers, and the man in charge is called Sergeant Hastings. He's played by Adam Baldwin. Outside, a man sees the dead cowboys and approaches a saloon and finds Kanan alone. Kanan says that he hears a noise, and the man says that they're doing a war dance. And a man comes in, and it turns out that he's a bartender, and Kanan asks him for a whiskey and some milk for the baby. The bartender pours him a drink, but his hand is shaking, and Kanan studies it for him. The bartender's name is Ernie, and he's played by Clayton Landy. Outside, the soldiers see the dead cowboys, and Kanan comes to the saloon. They talk, asking about how he got into the town, and Kanan shoots a scorpion that's crawling across a wooden post. Now here we go with the idea of the blind gunslinger as a character. The blind gunslinger has been a character in westerns for decades by the time Blind Justice was released, so audiences may even have a passing idea of what it entails. However, so that it can fit the plot, the blind gunslinger's abilities are near supernatural. This probably comes from the cliche that when a person loses their sight, all their other senses heighten, which isn't true. There's no denying that a blind gunslinger may be a cool idea, playing up on non-disabled people's perceptions of blind people when they do something that a seeing person may not expect. But the leap from Civil War soldier to blind sharpshooter takes a leap of imagination. It gets physical, and Kanan's about to shoot Sergeant Hastings when a woman comes out to stop them. She confronts Kanan and asks how many he's killed, and he says he didn't get a good look at them. This woman's name is Caroline, and she's played by Elizabeth Shue. Inside, Caroline says the town has been cut off from the outside world since the soldiers brought in a shipment of silver, and the gang in the local area have been after it ever since. And she asks Kanan how he lost his sight. Kanan says he lost his sight in the war, and Caroline says that she wants the town to be peaceful again. And she asks about the baby that Kanan has been carrying, and he says that it was a woman who died, and he made a promise to keep the baby safe. He also says the baby doesn't have a name. Outside, a cowboy comes into town shooting his gun and making noise, and the soldiers are hesitant as some cowboys bring in a man tied to a horse. They negotiate, but it turns out that the cowboy's friends are all dead, and he starts to panic. Kanan then comes out, and he shoots them all off their horses. Then somebody from the clock tower kills one of the soldiers and shoots Kanan, and the man knocks him over with his horse and leaves him in the sand. Then a flashback plays of Kanan in the Civil War, and then he wakes up in bed. He scrambles to find his glasses as Caroline comes in, and he shouts at her angrily to find them for him. She gives them to him, and he asks about the baby. They talk about the baby, and she says that he should take more care of it because it's his responsibility, and the baby should actually have a name. He asks when they're leaving, and she says that he hasn't helped them yet, and he says, considering what happened in the town earlier, he thinks that he has. In the saloon, Sergeant Hastings comes to see Kanan, and they argue. Caroline encourages them to sit down, and Kanan pulls a whiskey with Caroline's help. Kanan then negotiates a reward for helping, and soldiers say the reward should be serving his country. But Kanan says he just wants 10%, and that he should take it or leave it. Outside, Alcran is talking about Kanan, not believing he's blind just because he wears dark glasses. And this is a good point. It's interesting to know that there is at least one character in the film who understands that, because just because a person is blind, it doesn't mean they have to wear dark glasses. Some actors choose to do so, perhaps because they don't believe in their own ability to stare into the middle distance. Although, as we saw earlier, Kanan has misty lenses, which are often a sign that somebody is blind, at least in cinematic terms. In fact, if the film were to go the whole hog, Kanan would have had a white cane and maybe even a support animal, such as a dog, to help him get around. It perhaps doesn't help, though, that Kanan isn't only a great gunslinger, he's even better than most people who cannot see. He says they're riding into town to try and take what they want again. He says they'll be more prepared this time, and the man talking about Kanan says he would kill him, but he gets hit in the face for his trouble. And Alcran says that he wants this man to gouge out Kanan's eyes and bring them to him. In town, Kanan is with the soldiers as they unload all the silver. Kanan lights a cigar, asking for the silver to be brought to his room. Sergeant Hastings asks how he can explain how they're short on silver, and Kanan says he just could say that they just fell off a wagon, and he leaves the room. Outside, Kanan stumbles over a dead wolf, and he runs his hands over it. He hears somebody being berated by a group of people, and he fires a shot in the air to clear the crowd. And it turns out that it's the shaman that's being bullied, and Kanan grabs Father Malone by the scruff of the neck and warns him off. Inside, Kanan is being bandaged around his waist by Caroline. She's holding a rag to his abdomen and he cries in pain. But as she wraps the bandage around him, he settles down and it gets a bit intimate, a bit steamy between them. There's a bit of chemistry between them, romantic chemistry perhaps. We'll see. But then Kanan suddenly mentions the baby, and Caroline says that he should rest before he leaves. He ignores her though, and he ends up leaving the room. At the saloon, Kanan is talking to Ernie and asks if the saloon looks as bad as it smells. Kanan says he's just making fun of him, and they laugh. Ernie then asks if he's leaving tonight, and he says he looks a bit ragged around the edges. Kanan says he thinks he looks fine. He goes to leave. Ernie then mutters something under his breath, and Kanan shouts that he heard that before he leaves. He then goes to a room and senses trouble, so he shoots repeatedly at the door. However, Caroline's inside, and she shouts at him because she could have been shot. But soon a man comes out of nowhere and accosts Kanan and tries to kill him. Caroline then gets on this man's shoulders and pulls him away as Kanan points the gun at him. But the man thinks that the gun he's got is empty because he fired so many shots at the door. But it was the other gun that Kanan had grabbed, and he shoots him. And the man falls over the balcony, and then Kanan faints because he's been struggling with pain and he's finally succumbed to it. Alcaran is talking to Father Malone in the next scene, and it turns out that they've been working together the whole time. Father Malone says that Kanan is working with the soldiers, and Alcaran and his gang then ride out into town. Kanan is dreaming. There's some past trauma about the Civil War, and as another soldier points a gun at him, telling him to stay back as he sees a little girl near a burning building. He thinks he can save her, but she's shot and he screams in anguish. And he wakes up at the start and hears Caroline in the other room. He asks her what time it is and she comes to put on his glasses for him. They embrace and kiss, but the baby cries and it distracts Kanan. So Caroline goes back to her room and Kanan goes to see the baby. He strokes the baby's face and puts his finger in its mouth, and it stops crying, sucking on its finger. I mean, it's a cute scene, but I think considering the hygiene or lack thereof at the time, just don't think about it too much. Caroline says that she lied about her brother and where the town is. Caroline then confesses that she's lied about some things, and she wants Kanan to stay. And they get close again, but he walks past her and makes his way outside. Outside, Sergeant Hastings is telling Kanan what he needs to do to get out of town. Kanan then asks about Father Malone, but Sergeant Hastings doesn't understand why. And Kanan asks if he was going to wish him luck, but Sergeant Hastings tells him to go to hell. Kanan then makes his way on the horse as the gang prepare for him. They create little fires everywhere all around him, and they shoot into the sky and pull out a wagon that's on fire, and they trap him. But Kanan finds the best way through, and while pulling a scarf over his mouth and covering his horse's eyes, he makes his escape while the gang shoots at him. Kanan is then met by a group of soldiers, and one of them points his rifle at him, telling him to stop. And if you were thinking that you might not recognise anybody else in this film, this soldier is played by a young Jack Black. It's a little jarring, but it's a really fun little cameo for those who have followed his career since. Kanan is then brought to see their commander, and he asks for his name. He asks Kanan about the note, and He says the note says that he knows that he has some of the silver, and he wants it back. But Kanan threatens him, and is taken away by the soldiers again. Alacran has brought one of the men who let Kanan escape, and he tells his men to cut off his ear. Another man approaches him and says that the rest of the men are on their way. Kanan is then with Jack Black, and Jack tells him that he'll be hung when the soldiers get back. Kanan has got one hand cuffed to a wagon and he's not going anywhere, but he's using the other hand to catch a fly, and it impresses him when he does it several times. As Jack gets closer, he's amazed because Kanan is blind. He can't believe how he can do that. But then Kanan uses the opportunity to incapacitate Jack Black, and we never see him again. The soldiers are then preparing to confront the gang, and the soldiers in town are then talking, and one man is panicking because he's being goaded by one of the locals. Sergeant Hastings then breaks up the fight and they go outside, awaiting the gang. A soldier then rides into town and falls off his horse as he's been injured badly. Caroline comes out to help him, but Father Malone says it's too late, and he starts doing the last rites as the soldiers talk. Sergeant Hastings says that the man who died was one of the best, and he stops Father Malone and tells the soldiers to take Father Malone away. A battlefield is shown with many dead soldiers next. Kanan slowly rides the horse over the battlefield as he is accosted by the gang, and Alacran stands over him. He says Kanan killed his men, and Kanan says that they needed killing. He then holds his gun to Kanan's throat and threatens to kill him. And next we see that the gang has tied Kanan up, and Alacran says that he'll die slowly in the sun, and the vultures will pick on him, and he leaves. And I mean, this is Villain 101. This is doing the monologue, incapacitating the hero, and then just leaving, assuming he's going to die. It's not going to work out that way, I promise. A soldier in town asks Sergeant Hastings what they're going to do, as they only have 6 men now, and he says that they should wait for reinforcements, asking if anybody else has a better idea. The soldier says that they should surrender, but Sergeant Hastings shoots him instead, and points his gun at the other people in the room, asking if they have any other suggestions. Kanan then thinks back to his time in the war where he was left for dead and piled into a hole, buried with other people. And this is the point of the film where the audience may lose all sympathy for Kanan. There he is seen lying there in a pit surrounded by dead bodies as he is essentially being buried alive. He has his eyes open and some men are shoveling soil all over him, into his eyes, as he just lays there. What an idiot. This origin story of how he lost his sight is ridiculous and frankly takes away any weight from the story. He didn't lose his sight by bravely rushing into a burning building to save somebody, and he didn't lose his sight by being injured by shrapnel from gunfire. He lost his sight because he just laid there pretending to be dead while people shoveled dirt into his eyes. It undermines his whole story and quite frankly turns him from being a badass gunslinger into an idiot who couldn't keep his eyes closed. He whimpers as it cuts back to the present, and he hangs there wearily. He imagines the little girl he saw crying in front of him, and she reaches up her arms to him as he thinks about what he could have done to save her. He starts to pull up the ropes on his wrist though, and eventually gets himself free, falling to the ground, only to be caught by the shaman. And the next thing, the gang are celebrating, and Alacran says they're going to kill the rest of the soldiers. Father Malone protests, but Alacran says that the town is his now. The next day, the shaman is laughing and playing with dynamite, letting one bundle explode in the lake, and it wakes up Kanan, who is in his hut, and he goes out to find the shaman. I mean, that's one way to get woken up. He then comes to see Kanan, and the dynamite gives him an idea. The gang are settling up, and Alacran asks the man to guard the camp while they're gone. But the man says he'll miss the funeral, but Alacran says that he's not worthy to grieve with them. The gang then run into town, and the man who was asked to guard the camp is with them and goes into the saloon and asks where the dead cowboys are. A man says they're already buried, but the man insists on getting them. The gang are then having a standoff with the soldiers who are in the building. Sergeant Hastings tells them to go to hell. He says that they are prepared to die, but he gets turned on by one of the locals who shoots him and shouts to Alacran that they're coming out. And the soldiers surrender and the gang celebrates. And then we come to a soldier, Kanan, and the shaman, and they're burying the dynamite. The soldier says it's crazy, but Kanan assures him that he is the crazy one. The soldier's name is Captain Teller, and he's played by Douglas Roberts. The gang have taken over and are holding Caroline and the baby hostage. One of the men tries it on with her, and she fights him off, but he slaps her down and holds a knife to her face. He tells her to get undressed as he takes off his belt. But he hasn't seen Kanan coming into the room, and he grabs him from behind, in the balls, and threatens him as he takes the knife and knocks him out. At the church, Father Malone is being encouraged to come away by Captain Teller, but he won't leave. Captain Teller then runs out of the church and comes to see Kanan, saying Father Malone won't leave, and Kanan says it doesn't matter. Father Malone then comes out of the church and finds the wire leading to the dynamite and starts to pull it up. The shaman then comes out to distract him as Father Malone knocks into the ground. He runs back to the church and warns the gang who uncovered the dynamite, but Kanan comes in and shoots Father Malone and the dynamite, and the church explodes, and it's one of those massive big 90s building explosions where it doesn't just explode once, it explodes several times from different angles. They just don't do stuff like that anymore. Kanan and Alacran are the only ones left in the remains of the building as they get up after the explosion. Alacran comes and confronts Kanan, and they rest on the floor, and Kanan throws sand in his eyes and grabs his gun, standing up and pointing it at Alacran, saying he can't see him, he can't hear him, but he smells like shit, and he shoots him. And I mean, it's quite a cool line. It was quite a cool one, but it was probably the best bit of the film. And then the shaman gives Kanan a pendant as he's ready to leave town, and only gives him a rifle, telling him that there's still plenty of silver available. Karen then comes to say goodbye, and she gives him the baby, and he puts his hand over her face to feel what she looks like. And they could have just left it here, but no, they have to do the face touching thing. And if you listen to this podcast before, you'll know that blind people touching people's faces is a thing that I really don't like in movies, because it's not realistic in the slightest. Blind people do not do this. They do not need to know what a person looks like, and least of all, they don't know what a person looks like by touching their face. It's just not a thing. I don't think that it's as common as it used to be in cinema, but during the 90s particularly, it was a trope, and it just really annoys me. He gets on his horse and asks what he should call the baby. And he says that he should call the baby his mother's name, and Caroline agrees. Caroline then rides out of town. Okay, so that was film, and up next I'm going to give you a general idea of what I think about the film, and what I think about what it means for an undisabled audience. Blind Justice is the kind of film that would have been made in the 90s with good intentions. The idea of a blind gunslinger is certainly not a new one, and giving him centre stage evokes other such characters such as the blind swordsman of the Japanese Satoichi films. Having a lot of westerns being inspired by samurai films, this makes sense, but perhaps The Blind Gunslinger is a step too far. Amanda Sant plays the character first and a disability second, which is always important, and is certainly a role model for young blind men who may think of what it may be like to be in the Old West. However, with its brisk 90-minute runtime, it feels like Blind Justice doesn't have enough time to pad things out. So Kanan's background is mostly implied, with audiences having to join the dots for themselves, which may not be a bad thing, but it makes Blind Justice just feel kind of shallow. For a non-disabled audience, they miss the cliches coming from a mile away, and they're not wrong. Blind Justice plays its story rather predictably, but it's still a fun, albeit contained story. It just feels that where it's trying to show a positive depiction of a blind person, it leans into the common cliches of the face-touching super crip that is so often seen in cinema. Okay, so up next, I thought, as there isn't really much trivia to talk about, I thought I would talk about the history of The Blind Gunslinger. The first appearance of The Blind Gunslinger was probably in the 1964 film called Minnesota Clay, starring Karen Mitchell and directed by Sergio Corbucci. It's about an aging gunslinger who loses his sight due to a degenerative eye disease, and he uses his memory, vision, and his extremely good hearing so that he can take down the villains. This is probably the closest inspiration for Blind Justice, as the plots are practically the same. Next, in 1971, we have Blind Man, all one word, starring Tony Anthony and directed by Ferdinando Boldi, a title that was perhaps a little on the nose. It's about a man who uses a horse, an adapted rifle, and judges distances by sound so that he can hit his targets. In the more modern era, we have Thandavam from 2012, an Indian Tamil film directed by ALVJ and starring Vikram as Kenny, a blind assassin who uses echolocation to kill. And perhaps a nod to the character type throughout its cinema history, we have the character of Kane as played by Donnie Yen in John Wick Chapter 4 from 2023. He also played a similar character called Chewit Imwe in Rogue One: A Star Wars Story from 2016, a blind warrior monk who uses nothing but a stick to defeat as many stormtroopers as he could. Besides cinema, The Blind Gunslinger has been so popular that the character type has been used in many TV shows and literature. However, like all good westerns, it would be remiss not to mention the influence that came from Japanese cinema, and in particular Zasochi, the blind swordsman. Okay, that's it for this week. Next week I'll be watching A Quiet Place, about a family living in a post-alien invasion world where they have to be very, very quiet. If you'd like to contact me, you can do so via Bluesky at bluesky.com/film-ability. You can also email me at film-ability@outlook.com. And if you'd like to make a contribution to the things that I do here, you can find me at Patreon at patreon.com/film-ability. You can also find my book at Amazon on Kindle and paperback called Filmability, A History of Disability in Cinema. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.